The sun was setting on the horizon as the guests settled into chairs adorned with white flowers and satin bows. The air was filled with anticipation and emotion as everyone eagerly awaited the start of the ceremony. At the altar, Scott nervously adjusted the tie of his impeccable black suit, his unfocused eyes fixed on an invisible point in front of him. Scott, a 35-year-old man, was known for his passion for music and his dedication as a singing teacher. His dark hair was carefully combed back, and his stubble gave him a charming, laid-back look. Despite not being able to see, his radiant smile lit up his face, reflecting the happiness he felt in his heart. Beside him, the best man James, his best friend since childhood, whispered words of encouragement. "It's almost time, Scott. You look amazing, man. Tina is going to be speechless when she sees you." Scott let out a nervous laugh. "Well, at least one of us will be able to enjoy the view," he joked, but there was a hint of melancholy in his voice. The past 12 months had been quite a journey for Scott. Losing his sight so suddenly had turned his world upside down, but it had also led him to find the love of his life. Tina had become his beacon in the darkness, his guiding light in a world he could no longer see. As he waited, Scott reflected on the events that had brought him there. He vividly remembered that fateful day, a year ago. It was a typical autumn morning. Scott was walking eagerly along the sidewalk toward the small cafe he frequented every day during his break at the music conservatory. The aroma of freshly roasted coffee and fresh bread filled the air, mingling with the scent of fallen leaves. Upon entering the cafe, Scott greeted the barista with a warm smile. "The usual, please, Mike." "Sure, Professor. A double cappuccino coming right up," Mike replied cheerfully. Scott positioned himself near the window, his favorite spot to watch the streets hustle and bustle. That's when he saw her for the first time, a magical sight passing by on the sidewalk. Her long hair flowed gently with the breeze, tied back in a relaxed ponytail. She wore a floral dress that danced around her legs as she walked with light, graceful steps. For a moment, Scott forgot to breathe. She was, without a doubt, the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. His eyes followed her as she passed by, quickly disappearing from view. "Scott! Scott!" Mike's voice brought him back to reality. "Your coffee is ready." Shaking his head to clear it, Scott grabbed his coffee, but his thoughts remained with the mysterious woman. In the days and weeks that followed, he saw her pass by several times, always at the same time, always equally stunning. On a particularly sunny morning, Scott was once again at the coffee shop, his eyes fixed on the window, eagerly waiting for a glimpse of the one who had captured his imagination. "Scott?" the barista called, holding the coffee. "Distracted again looking at that woman? At this rate, you're starting to look like a creep spying on people. Why don't you go talk to her?" Mike's words were the push Scott needed. With a sudden surge of courage, he grabbed his coffee and walked decisively out the door. His heart was pounding in his chest as his eyes searched for the familiar figure in the busy street. Then everything changed in an instant. A deafening screech of tires on asphalt, a shout of warning, and then darkness. Scott woke up in a hospital room, his head throbbing and body aching. The first thing he noticed was the oppressive silence, followed by the terrible realization that no matter how much he blinked or rubbed his eyes, he couldn't see anything but impenetrable darkness. Panic rose in his chest, his breathing becoming fast and shallow. "Hey, someone!" he shouted, his voice trembling with fear. "Someone, please! I can't see!" The following days were a whirlwind of exams, consultations, and diagnoses. The doctors explained that the vision loss was the result of an injury to the visual cortex of the brain, caused by the impact of the accident. There was no physical damage to the eyes or optic nerves, which left the door open for a possible recovery. "The loss of vision can be temporary or permanent," the neurologist gently explained. "It all depends on how your brain recovers from the trauma. We will start treatment to reduce brain swelling, and you will participate in rehabilitation sessions to stimulate brain activity." Scott heard the words, but they seemed distant, as if they were coming from another world, a world he could no longer see. It was in that moment of profound darkness and despair that a ray of light entered Scott's life, even though he still couldn't see it. "Scott!" A soft and melodious voice called his name. "You have a visitor." For a moment, Scott thought it might be his parents, but the voice was unfamiliar to him. "Hello?" The female voice spoke again, closer now. "My name is Tina. I saw what happened. I was walking down the street when the accident occurred. I was so worried. I wanted to know how you were." Scott's heart raced. There was something in her voice, a kindness and genuine concern that touched him deeply. "Hi, Tina," he replied, trying to smile in the direction from which the voice came. "Thank you for coming. It's very kind of you." Tina approached, and Scott caught a faint scent of flowers she wore. It was comforting and somehow familiar. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice full of compassion. Scott hesitated for a moment before answering honestly. "Scared," he admitted. "The doctors say the vision loss might be temporary, but what if it's not?" He felt a gentle hand touch his. "Hey, don't think like that," Tina said firmly. "After witnessing that accident, I'm sure you are strong, Scott. You will get through this, whatever the outcome." At that moment, a nurse entered bringing Scott's lunch. Tina, without hesitation, offered to help him eat. With patience and gentleness, she guided Scott's hand, describing each item on the plate and helping him navigate the meal. That first visit from Tina marked the beginning of a deep and transformative friendship. She returned every day, bringing with her stories from the outside world, music for Scott to listen to, and above all, hope. When Scott was discharged from the hospital, Tina continued to be a constant presence in his life. She helped him adapt to his new reality, describing the world around him with vivid and colourful words. Scott discovered that Tina was a teacher at a local kindergarten. She loved her job and spoke enthusiastically about her students and the lessons she taught. Scott, in turn, shared his passion for music, often singing to her or teaching her about music theory. As the months passed, their friendship blossomed into something deeper. Scott found himself eagerly anticipating Tina's visits, his heart racing at the sound of her footsteps approaching. He loved the sound of her laughter, the way she described the world to him, and the kindness in every touch. Tina, in turn, was increasingly enchanted by Scott's strength and determination. She admired how he faced each challenge with courage and good humour, how his passion for music remained unwavering even in the darkness. It was on a quiet spring afternoon, sitting in the park near Scott's house, that he realised he was hopelessly in love with Tina. The sound of children playing in the distance, the fragrance of newly bloomed flowers, and the gentle breeze created a magical atmosphere. "Tina," Scott said softly, turning in her direction. "I know I can't see your face, but I feel like I know every detail of your soul. You brought light into my life when I was in the deepest darkness. I think I'm in love with you." There was a moment of silence that seemed to last an eternity. Scott felt his heart pounding in his chest, fearing he had made a terrible mistake. Then he felt Tina's delicate hands touch his face, and her lips met his in a gentle and emotional kiss. "I love you too, Scott," Tina whispered when they parted. "From the first day at the hospital, I knew there was something special about you." Scott returned to teaching singing, his confidence restored by Tina's love and support. She was by his side at every medical appointment, at every therapy session, celebrating every small progress. 6 months after confessing his love, Scott decided he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Tina. With his father's help, he chose an engagement ring, a delicate piece of white gold with a small solitaire diamond. Scott took Tina for a picnic in the park, where they had shared their first kiss. With his heart racing, he held her hands and said, "Tina, you have changed my life in ways I could never have imagined. You have shown me that there is light even in the darkest darkness. I want to spend the rest of my days by your side, listening to your laughter, feeling your touch, loving every part of you. Tina, Will you marry me? Tina was silent for a moment, and Scott felt a tear fall on his hand. Oh, Scott, she said, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes. As Scott placed the ring on Tina's finger, she laughed softly. How can you want to marry someone whose face you have never seen? What if I'm an ugly woman? She joked, trying to ease the tension of the moment. Scott smiled, gently touching Tina's face. You can be an ogre. I don't care, he said tenderly. I see beyond what the eyes can see. And with that, he pulled her into a passionate kiss. The following months were full of wedding preparations. Scott and Tina wanted a simple ceremony, but surrounded by their closest friends and family. In the week leading up to the big day, Scott began to notice something strange. Occasionally, he saw small flashes of light or occasional shadows. Sometimes he could perceive vague shapes and more defined outlines. He said nothing to Tina or the doctors, not wanting to create false hopes. And now, here he was, at the altar, waiting anxiously for his bride's arrival. Scott's heart was pounding in his chest, a mix of nervousness and excitement pulsing through his veins. Suddenly, the music changed. The first chords of the wedding march filled the air, and a collective sigh of admiration echoed among the guests. Scott felt a sudden shift in his perception. His vision, which until then had been only darkness punctuated by occasional flashes of light, began to clear. At first, there were only indistinct shapes and patches of colour. But as the music continued and the guests' sighs intensified, Scott's vision became sharper. He blinked several times, unable to believe what was happening. And then, he saw her. Walking down the aisle, wrapped in a white dress that floated around her like a cloud, was Tina. Her long hair was elegantly styled, adorned with small white flowers. She held a bouquet of white roses and smiled radiantly, her eyes fixed on Scott. Tears started to stream down Scott's face. He could see, even though his vision was still blurred and misty. He could see the flowers that formed an aisle, the smiling faces of the guests, the golden rays of the setting sun. But above all, he could see Tina. When Tina reached the altar, she immediately sensed that something was different. Scott's eyes, once vacant and unfocused, now looked at her with an intensity that made her gasp. "Scott," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. With trembling hands, Scott touched Tina's face, gently tracing her features. His fingers, which had long served as his eyes, now confirmed what his newly recovered sight showed him. "Tina," he said, his voice choked with tears. "It's you, the most beautiful woman I have ever seen in my entire life." He paused, a smile of recognition lighting up his face. "It was always you." Tina looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Scott laughed softly, tears of joy streaming down his face. "Before the accident, I used to see a beautiful woman walk by on the street every day. I admired her from afar, dreaming of one day having the courage to talk to her." He gently caressed Tina's face. "It was you, Tina. The woman I admired from afar and the woman who saved me in the darkness are the same person." Tina gasped, suddenly remembering. "The man in the cafe, was that you? I remember seeing someone watching me through the window, but I never—" Scott nodded, smiling through tears. "Fate, isn't it? On the day of the accident, I had finally decided to talk to you, and look at us now." The two laughed softly, tears of joy mingling on their faces. The officiant, visibly moved, cleared his throat gently. "Well, it seems we have a miracle on our hands. Shall we proceed with the ceremony?" Scott and Tina nodded, unable to take their eyes off each other. The ceremony continued, but for the couple, it felt like the world had stopped. Every word, every promise held deeper meaning now. When they were finally declared husband and wife, the kiss they shared was full of love, gratitude, and promises for the future. The guests applauded and celebrated, many with tears in their eyes at the miracle they had witnessed. As the night progressed, and the guests danced and celebrated, Scott and Tina found a moment of quiet. Hand in hand, they gazed at the starry sky, grateful for every moment that had brought them there. "You know," Scott said softly, "for a long time, I thought losing my sight was the worst thing that could have happened to me. But now I see it was the best. It brought me to you." Tina smiled, squeezing his hand. "And it brought me to you." Who would have thought that the mysterious man at the cafe and the brave patient at the hospital were the same person? Scott laughed, pulling her close. "Fate has an interesting sense of humor, doesn't it?" "Certainly," Tina agreed, leaning in for a kiss. A few days later, Scott's doctors examined him and considered his recovery remarkable. After a series of preliminary tests, they attributed the recovery to Scott's brain's neuroplasticity. "It is truly remarkable," explained the neurologist, clearly fascinated. "It seems that other areas of your brain have compensated for the function of the damaged visual cortex. Additionally, the reduction in swelling and the natural healing of brain tissue have contributed to the partial restoration of the neural pathways responsible for vision. It's a rare case, but not without precedent." Scott listened to the medical explanation with a smile, but his eyes never left Tina. To him, the explanation was much simpler. Love had healed his vision. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.